All right, gonna have a fun one today. Gonna chat a little bit about Elon Musk, and as I was going through everything that's going on with Twitter right now, which is just a fascinating and fun timeline, where it's very politicized, and I'm not as concerned with that side of it. I know Musk's motivations coincide with a lot of, I guess, other people's political motivations, and I'm honestly not as worried about that, at least as a topic. I'm more just really interested in the way Musk is approaching this. I almost said takeover, but it's not a takeover. He bought the company. I'm really interested in the way that Musk is approaching this because it feels to me so much like what happens on a football team when a new coach comes in. Because if you look at Elon Musk, and and again, like I don't care for the purposes of this conversation about any of the political sides of it. I don't do Twitter for politics. I restrict it pretty much to sports. So the operational side of taking over a company and how you go about doing it, it feels to me so much the way football coaches operate when they take over a new football team, and especially successful coaches. So the immediate comparison I made in my mind was Urban Meyer, which again, that almost sounds immediately like I'm making fun of or picking on Elon Musk because people forget that Urban Meyer won 3 national championships. His finish in Jacksonville was so atrocious that he actually managed to, in the where does my mind go to first part of Urban Meyer, a lot of people go to the Jacksonville Jaguars first because he was a disaster. He won 3 national championships, was incredibly successful in college, ended up losing more games in Jacksonville than he did in his entire time at Ohio State. It was a disaster. But there's some elements that are similar to Elon Musk taking over Twitter after after being extremely successful at building electric cars and rocket ships, which those are difficult things to do, except he's become one of the very richest men in the world by doing all that. He's obviously a very successful person, just as Urban Meyer was really successful. I think the biggest theme that's the same is you take a guy who has a cult-like following or almost like totalitarian power and charisma at the other places that he's been. So Elon Musk, he's known for driving his employees very hard, but he compensates them well. It wasn't always that way. He used to get a lot of people to come work for him at Tesla for less than market value because they believed in the message that Elon Musk was selling, and he still gets that to a large degree. So he has these companies where people buy in to Elon Musk's vision for the world and for technology and all those things. So he gets these guys, these people in his organization that are true believers, and he drives them hard, and a lot of them leave. There's a lot of attrition, but it's a template that works because he created it. In going to Twitter now, though, just as in Urban Meyer going from Ohio State or Florida, where he's got a relatively captive audience and a lot of guys that he recruited, and they're 18 years old when they get in there, so he can mold them into the players that he wants them to be. Urban Meyer goes to the Jaguars, and it's a whole different deal. It's a different type of employee. He's dealing with grown men who are professionals and business people to an extent, and who are not captive, in a lot of ways have more power than the coach in the NFL. Likewise, Elon Musk goes to Twitter. It's a different culture, and these are people who are just not dyed-in-the-wool Elon Musk acolytes. And many of them maybe would have had an opportunity to work for Elon Musk out of college, or if they wanted to hop jobs, but they chose Twitter over Tesla, which is fine, and except that, okay, what happens when a football coach comes in and needs to get buy-in? The same thing that Elon Musk is doing right now. I think you got to have somewhat of a purge, and you got to swap out the people that you don't think are on your side to the people that are on your side. I found an article in The Athletic that was really interesting because I think you can find a lot of corollaries from Urban Meyer to things that Elon Musk has done or not done, to Elon Musk's credit in some situations. but I think he might fall prey to some of these too. So these were the moments that kind of signified exactly where it went wrong for Urban Meyer. And I'm not going to read all 10 of them, but one of the spoilers for Urban Meyer was the surprising lack of sneakiness. The Jags early in the season had repeatedly failed to convert in key situations on 4th and short. So basically, facing 4th and goal from inside the 1-yard line in week 5 against the Titans, the Jags called for a Carlos Hyde run. He lost 3 yards, and the complaint here was that Meyer explained that Trevor Lawrence wasn't ready to do QB sneaks from under center, which is among the safest of all plays in that situation, which came as a surprise to Lawrence, who insisted he was comfortable with them. Jacksonville's complete inability to succeed in these junctures felt like a clear coaching problem, both in terms of planning and communication. Instead, Meyer pinned the blame on his rookie franchise quarterback. This is a theme that would repeat with Meyer a lot, which is that Meyer a lot of times showed that he not only didn't quite know what he was getting into in the NFL, it's that he either didn't know and understand his own team, or he would misrepresent how things actually played out on his own team. So Urban Meyer, in saying that Trevor Lawrence wasn't ready for a quarterback sneak, or perhaps even the wisdom of calling, I mean, you can run Carlos Hyde from that situation. It's not like teams never do. But I do think that there was a certain transparency in the NFL that you don't get in college football. In college football, the questions in the press conference don't tend to be as difficult. There's more of a dictatorial sense out of the coach, out of the CEO. Excuse me, not CEO, the head coach. And then also, I think that players aren't usually as empowered to kind of speak out or say things against the coach, where you don't have that in the NFL, and you're going to get exposed real quick. There were other times in press conferences where it was clear that Urban Meyer didn't know who players like Aaron Donald were and things like that. He just didn't know what he was getting into. Has Elon fallen into that trap of getting too far into something that he didn't quite realize he was getting into? I think you could argue yes in this situation. And it's not like he's never done this before. He's done that and been successful. It's just with the Twitter, there was that period where he had made the offer and then tried to pull the hell out. And I do get the sense that somewhere along the way, Elon may have realized that he had bitten off more than he could chew. Kind of like when a politician decides he's going to fix healthcare. Republican, Democrat, they think they're going to fix healthcare, and then they sit down and their advisors try to make them listen for at least a half hour on healthcare, and they realize, like, oh boy, this is going to be way more difficult than I thought. That might be partially true. The James Robinson saga. Okay, so James Robinson was and is a promising running back, but that he's got a curious track record so far because he was traded, Jacksonville traded him earlier this year. So there might be something more to James Robinson than people knew last year, but at the time, it looked like Robinson was this promising young back that Urban Meyer would just take out of the game completely. And then at times would take him out of the game, blame it on the position coach, and then later admit that it was actually Urban Meyer himself who made that decision. I think in some respects, you could draw a correlation to this with how Elon has treated the blue check mark, which has been one of the big and most notable news items for Elon taking over. Was when he started Twitter Blue, which meant that people were going to be able to he didn't start Twitter Blue. He turned Twitter Blue into something whereby people would be able to buy a blue check mark, a verification status. That upset a lot of people for various reasons. Some people, the most annoying people, were upset because their blue check mark makes them feel very, very special. And please don't take that away from them. It makes them feel oh so special. I think if you're going to the actual real substantive issue with that, it's that the verification status does give legitimacy to the platform, in that it takes people who are there, who have followings, who have influence, and does funnel people and direct people, or at least give credence to those people's voices. So I think in Elon's mind, that would be, I think, more balanced perhaps between the political parties or conservative or liberal ideology, but that you would still have that credibility factor of like, okay, if this is a public person with a large following, I know for sure that this is him or her. Without the blue check mark, you lose that. But I think that what Elon, I have a nephew named Eli, and I go to Eli automatically. With what Elon might not have realized that, like in a lot of ways, the people who are on Twitter who have some level of public presence and a social media following are on Twitter for reasons other than why people are on Instagram or Facebook or elsewhere, in large part because Twitter is really hard to monetize. So there are a lot of people who have notable Twitter followings and who might be working in news or they're athletes or whomever else. And it's a lot harder to make money on Twitter. It's not like Instagram. It's not like Facebook. So you have these James Robinson type of running backs, these guys, these producers who do it without necessarily a whole lot of money or fanfare or what have you. But it's a valuable resource, and to kind of diminish that felt like a cash grab. That felt like something that wasn't necessary for the long-term health of the company and was not like revolutionary in a way that was changing Elon Musk has changed the auto industry. He's changed space travel. This felt a little bit like slapping a new decal on the space shuttle and saying that that's a revolutionary change, when it was in fact just a way to sell more NASA t-shirts or make a little bit more cash short-term on Twitter. Okay, this is one area where I think Elon has it way over Urban Meyer, and it's the Alabama comment. Urban Meyer, after a week 2 loss to Denver in his one partial season as an NFL coach, told Vic Fangio, the head coach of Denver at the time, every week it's like playing Alabama in the NFL. Where Urban Meyer had realized and understood now fully, oh yeah, there are no Vanderbilts in the NFL. Even when you're playing the Houston Texans or the Detroit Lions or somebody else like that, it's hard every single week, and there's no relenting. Everybody's in Alabama. I think that Elon Musk, look, you might despise Elon Musk, but you have to give him credit for taking on auto giants in a way that, correct me if I'm wrong, I can't think of anybody else that's done it in quite that fashion. So I don't think in this aspect or this area, Elon would be surprised or shocked. I think he's made an entire career out of doing things that people said were too impossible because the powers that be are too large. And also doing it in a way, and I honestly, doing it in a way where it doesn't even necessarily always feel adversarial, in a way that a lot of Silicon Valley people are going to say that they're going to, be industry disruptors and then somehow paint out those industry players as the evil giants that need to be slayed. When he talks about the auto industry, he talks a lot about sharing information because it's the rising tide that lifts all ships. He does a lot of things open source because, whether he genuinely believes it or because it's good business strategy, it kind of inspires a whole lot of people to get involved with projects and push them forward. Space travel, governments in general had that pretty much on lockdown. So to take on something that previously only governments really had the resources to do, that's a pretty big task. So taking on a little social media company that's maybe the 4th or 5th most popular one in the United States is that's not necessarily as big or unimaginable a task. And I think he's fine on that one. The Urban Meyer, Urban Meyer getting ground upon by one of his colleagues. This article phrases it as Urban Meyer getting lost in the grind. So Urban Meyer had his little dalliance with a colleague at his restaurant in Ohio State, in Columbus, Ohio, after the rest of the team had left Cleveland, just after they played the Browns. And it was at the beginning of the bye week. Urban Meyer got caught with a woman who is not his wife grinding on him at a restaurant, completely consensual, but a very, very, very bad look. Not just from the public's eye, but in the NFL insiders' eyes. A lot of us said, wait a second, like he didn't fly back with the team? That's just not done in the NFL. And it became very clear that Urban Meyer did not want to put in the requisite time, the established customs of the NFL as far as how much work it takes. And then simply, in that instance, fly home with the team so you can be on top of the injury reports, everything else. The fact that it's a bye week is inconsequential to the coaches until maybe a day or two after that game. That's when the coaches get a little bit of a break. I don't think that Elon Musk faces that same issue. I think Elon Musk is he probably puts his money where his mouth is when it comes to working long hours and being genuinely committed to it. So when he sends out this missive the other day that basically people had to declare whether they are all in or not, I get it. I think he probably anticipated there were a lot of people at Twitter that were going to grate against his lifestyle or his work environment. And I don't necessarily think that's not the way I would run a company, but I think that it's consistent with what has worked with him before. It's that in those other situations, he was able to build from the ground up, so he didn't have to purge a lot of people that weren't on his side or didn't see the world the same way he did. Now he's in a spot where some people just simply aren't going to want to work the way he wants to work. I don't think that the company's going to fail because of it, because there are a lot of like constitutional properties to Twitter that make it a better social media platform for very specific purposes than other social media platforms. It's got a competitive advantage. It doesn't have a competitive advantage for making money, which is a problem if you're a corporate shareholder or if that's how you're keeping score. But I think in terms of people trading, exchanging information, knowledge, opinions, having not so civil and not as often productive debates, and yet ones that engage people, I think it does that really well for a lot of the reasons that include just that non-monetization part of it. It makes it a little bit more of a pure conversation, not a perfect conversation. It's ugly on Twitter. I despise it most days. But it's not quite the same thing. So I think that the biggest difference between Urban Meyer, I will say the two biggest differences between Urban Meyer in Jacksonville and Elon Musk and Twitter is, one, the owner in Jacksonville, Shad Khan, just flat out got sick and disgusted and tired of dealing with Urban Meyer, so he fired him and hired a new coach to come in. Elon Musk has been fired from being the CEO before of his own company. So like he almost did pull an Urban Meyer when it comes to that specific role as being the head manager, but he still owns the company. So as it is with Twitter, Twitter is not going to fire Elon Musk. Maybe Elon Musk will realize at some point that he, needs to change his role, and I think that'll definitely happen. He'll need to change his role in it, but ultimately he owns the company. And then the other side of it too is that I do think that it's not so easy to just go out and copy a company and, commoditize it somehow because there's there's obviously a brain trust and a history. There's certain proprietary things that make it difficult to do that. And Twitter does have a certain niche that has a lot of value, even though it doesn't always feel like it. It's really the best search engine there is for current events. You try to find out current events on other platforms, and I think it's just a lot harder to stay up to date and figure out exactly what's going on, or at least when you delude yourself into thinking you know what's going on. So there's that. And then, but the big ironic part of it, and again, I don't know if Twitter will ever win out on the financial side of things, like and become dominant or the preeminent, most profitable or most used social media platform, is because it's almost inherently hard to monetize. And that is a good thing if it comes to getting people on there who I think more often are doing it just because it's a good place to get their word out or their opinion out. That could change over time, but you don't get that necessary. I don't think you get as unblemished a version of those things on other social media platforms. But because of that, also, I think if you did make it really easy to monetize, I think then you end up getting a more sanitized version of it. I think then you get people with more ulterior motives up there, perhaps. And those things, I think, are going to stick with Twitter, whether Elon Musk is involved or if he sells it off or elsewhere. And then I guess the third thing is, hey, he just paid $44 billion for it. He's super rich, but $44 billion is a lot for anybody. It's not like a few weeks of discord and trouble are going to have him abandon a $44 billion investment unless there's some kind of legal maneuvering that he could get away with. So I think if you're a huge Urban Meyer, if you're a huge Elon Musk stan and you feel like he's being unfairly attacked, I think you could rest assured that not all the doom that's predicted for Elon Musk is remotely even going to happen. If you're somebody that doesn't like Elon Musk and you want him to fail, I do think that this might not be the monetary success that perhaps he or others thought that it would be. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you look at his motivations for purchasing it and some of the texts that have come out between him and his wife, I disagree with him. I disagree with Elon Musk on some of his opinions or his concepts of free speech. There's a convenient lack of understanding of the First Amendment specifically that some people like to throw around kind of recklessly. So I agree with him partly on some of the issues that Twitter has had with how they handle content. I don't think it's as much of a First Amendment issue as others do. But regardless of all that, I do think that this was a bit of a passion project for him. And if it's not as financially successful as other companies of his are or other projects of his are, I don't think he's going to mind as much as long as he substantively changes exactly how they handle some of their business. It's a whole lot to pull off right off the bat in a matter of a few weeks. So that's about as much fence as I can straddle for the moment. And I wish you all a good day. I'm going to start using this this is kind of my rough draft of the edited version that'll come out. So when we start doing these live streams, if you just come on and hang out, a lot of times I'm going to end up taking this footage and adding in some video to put over it and, cut out my ums and ahs. And we've talked for about 22 minutes. I've probably made like 7 or 8 good points. We'll just whittle it down to the 7 or 8 good points. But if you, when you contribute and leave comments or anything, I'll try to incorporate those in as much as possible. Other than that, we've got to do a Cardinals preview that I'm going to put out tomorrow for the Texans game, and maybe a little bit of Astros content because my wife Brandy has been clamoring for a Framber Valdez. She basically wants me to do a Framber Valdez documentary. And the part about Framber Valdez that intrigues me the most is his work with a sports psychologist. Brandy gets annoying with this. Brandy, if you're watching right now, I feel this way. Because the same thing happened with Altuve when he was having some fielding issues a couple years ago. She was furious and irate with me that we were discussing Jose Altuve's fielding issues and some people's use of the Y word. We never used it. We never used the Y word on air because she doesn't want the athletes themselves hearing that. So with Framber, I've been very intrigued with his use of a sports psychologist because he went from being so erratic on the mound to being the picture of consistency, the ability to bounce back from mistakes. His double error in the playoffs that he bounced back from brilliantly. I thought that was awesome. But a lot of it is because he's worked with a sports psychologist. Brandy doesn't want me mentioning it too much because she doesn't want Framber to hear so much talk from various media people about his former issues mentally that somehow it gets in his head, like messing with a kicker and when he's on his way out to kick a field goal. This is like the only thing Brandy and I argue about. These are our arguments in life, is exactly how I should treat a very complimentary documentary about Framber Valdez. But that's where we are with Framber. So I used 2 different sports psychologists when I played football, and I do think that both those guys One was Fran Parazzolo, who had worked with the Yankees for a long time. He worked with the Texans for a couple of years, and I still think he's working in the Woodlands. The other guy was James Lair, who's written a few books, one of which was Mental Toughness Training for Sports, I think. So I remember I was flying on an airplane, headed into my 5th year in the NFL, and I just had picked up a magazine at the airport newsstand, and it was this article about this sports psychologist who worked with tennis players. And it was Jim Lair. He had a place down in Orlando, and I think Lake Nona in Orlando. And he works with a lot of tennis players, some baseball players, but a lot of tennis players. And tennis is, one of the first sports that was really heavy into sports psychology, because there was some dude from Harvard that had written a book back in the day. So I read this, and it sounded really good. So I was playing for Jacksonville at the time. I went down and spent a few days working out at his facility and talking to Jim Lair, read his book, and it kind of changed me like that. Because I'd been a guy that was always really super concerned with making mistakes, like worrying about making mistakes, beating myself up over making mistakes, to the point where it created a more conservative football player, a less aggressive football player than I needed to be. So I spent really just one afternoon with him, just a pretty long session, and a lot of the other stuff was just physical training. But he kind of taught me to reframe my challenge and frame, how to rebound from mistakes, how to reset my mind and my mindset, and it went a long way. I ended up having the best season. I ended up having the best season that I had up to that point. Then I got to Houston, and I would still have these same issues, and this is where Framber's still talking to his sports psychologist every week, multiple times per week. Is important that he keeps up with it. And Fran Parazzolo, at one point, just broke it down and basically said, "Hey Seth, they don't pay you to not make mistakes. Look at the guys who make a lot of money in the NFL." And he was saying that because that's a good gauge of what teams want. Not as a way to use money to motivate me, but say, "Hey, look at the teams in the NFL. You can tell what they value by how much they pay guys. And the defensive linemen that get paid a lot of money are not getting paid to not make mistakes. They're getting paid to make plays." And he almost kind of put it, I think he understood that I was somebody that when I'm an employee, I feel a very big responsibility to my employer. And the way I had framed it in my brain all those years was I don't want to let my employer down by making a mistake, or my coach, or my teammates, all those. I feel a lot of responsibility to those guys. He just flipped it and said, "Well, you're letting your employer down, and you're letting your teammates down if you don't focus more on making plays." And that switched it immediately, and that got me back again to being somebody that makes more plays. So Framber is a guy that would take the losses and take the setbacks way too seriously, because I think he's a passionate guy. You see how passionate he is just when he's in the dugout watching a game. To tamp that down and to teach him the breathing exercises and how to relax and how to rebound from, and kind of harness that passion instead of letting it spiral out of control at times. I don't think that's as simple as just Dusty Baker telling him some stories about guys back in the day. So the Framber produced piece is going to take a little bit longer. Please, I honestly, even if there's only one person when I'm doing the live stream, because this is very unorganized and it's not exactly what the finished product will be on YouTube, it helps a lot when I know that I'm talking to somebody. So even when you show up to keep yourself from being bored during lunch, it's really awesome just to have a few people here. So I will keep you guys updated and look for the preview for the upcoming Washington game tomorrow. Now it's defining the word.